Are you ready to stop riding the emotional elevator of life? Are you ready to learn how to elevate your emotions that keep you psychologically traumatized or in an addictive behavior? You are in the right place. Here is your host, Sandee Byrd, trauma, addiction, life, and spiritual coach of the Emotional Elevator Show.
Well, welcome everyone. I have the honor and privilege tonight to introduce a now friend, Vincent Ellis White. He resides here in Richmond, Virginia, and I met Vincent by being part of a audience first, and then on one of his difficult conversations, I was one of his panelists, and I just was attracted to his story. I was attracted to how does he do all this and still remain positive, still remain passionate, and still remain genuine and authentic. So, as I was saying, he has what is called difficult conversations here in Richmond, Virginia. And during one of the conversations, because I knew one of his panelists prior to when I showed up, and the night of, and I don't even remember what the title was of that one that I showed up at, and something that one of the panelists, Jasmine, said really resonated to me. So Vincent right away turned to the audience and says, "Does anyone want to reflect on this?" Of course I did, tears and all, because I am an emotional person, tears and all. And then I let out an F bomb. And that was it with Vincent and I, because at that point there was a connection with everybody, with me, because I spoke how I felt and I was welcomed by how it was felt, even though it was a challenging conversation to be had. And then for me to talk about my own family. And from then on is when I started embracing my talking more about my multicultural children and about my interracial relationship and how that was very difficult time of my life, even though I loved my husband and we have three wonderful children, it was still a part of my life that still had trauma behind it from family and friends. But that's not why I'm on here. We're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about is Vincent Ellis White, who he is, what he does, and how does he still stay genuine, authentic. And then we'll get into what he does to elevate his emotions, because I always have this show. We go very deep in the beginning. Then, of course, we go into how we elevate emotions. And I don't even really think I talked about, because you are listening to me on the Emotional Elevator, or you're watching. And this is on Inspired Choices Network. And I'm Sandee Byrd, but I have the honor and privilege to host tonight and have a conversation, a difficult conversation with Vincent Ellis White. And those of you who know he's on, please come over to Inspired Choices Network, join the chat, because this is your opportunity to have those questions presented to Vincent, since we've always been like, we felt like we were in that hot seat because we didn't know what the questions were being asked. And then as they were asked and we responded, it's your opportunity if you want to join us to have a question asked to Vincent. So, Vincent, tell us about Vincent. Who is Vincent Ellis White?
Well, first of all, Sandy, thank you for having me on, and thank you to everybody listening. I appreciate you all. I'm honored to be here. I'm Vincent Ellis White. There's the long version and short version. So I guess for the sake of time, short version is I'm born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. I've moved around a lot, so I've been all over. Even though I call my particular upbringing kind of centered around South Side area of the city of Richmond. That's where my entire family is from, and that's where I, have my roots laid at. But I also spent plenty of time in Chesterfield, many, many years in Chesterfield, as well as the West End part of the city of Richmond, due to other family members being spread out. So I'm from Richmond, born and raised, grew up with a single mother in the home and a grandmother, an aunt, and a grandfather who helped raise me. I had a absentee father, but I didn't know who this father was because he would be in and out of jail as I was growing up. And so he was a repeated offender or habitual offender. And my mom was taking me back and forth to see him in my upbringing. And so during my upbringing, from, as a young kid up into my teens, I was going to see him. So that was a part of my life too, going to see him, as well as there was times he was home and I would spend time with his side of the family over in the West End. For those listening to Richmond, like in the city West End, like near Byrd Park and all those areas. And so spent a lot of time there with that side of the family as well. But I was really close to my mom. I always had strong Black women that helped raise me, from my mom, my grandmother, and my aunt. And then my grandfather was well respected in the South Side city of Richmond, in the community. He owned a seafood shop, called Billy's Seafood. And I didn't know it at the time, but I learned about entrepreneurship. I learned about community building and just the importance of your reputation being intact. As I look back, I learned all those things from him, and so got to give him credit for that. But that's me in a nutshell. Like I said, it's a long version, but what I say is the father that I knew to be my father, that I grew up only knowing him. I was named after him. I found out at the age of 16 that he is not my biological father. My mom sat me down one day and told me he was not my biological father, and that like disrupted my entire world, because even though he was somebody that at times I would be embarrassed by, he was also the only man I knew as my father, the only father I loved, and I did love him, and it just was a mighty blow to me. This was before the internet, so it wasn't like you can go looking up, people. It wasn't 23andMe and all those different sites. It was just like you have to go into social services if you want to look for somebody. And so my mom didn't have much information. She just told me my biological father's name, and his name was Chris Anderson. And so I didn't have anything to go on besides that, no pictures, nothing. And so that left a big hole in my heart. It left a lot of confusion on my mind, and that kind of changed the trajectory of where I was going. I started getting into trouble. And I was always like the popular kid, like funny, making everybody laugh. I'm always just like looking good on paper. And once that happened to me, it disrupted my world for many reasons. Like I lost a little bit of trust in my mom, and me and my mother were very, very close and still are very, very close. But that made me lose a little bit of trust in my mom for the moment. Um, as well as I feel like the butt of this big joke. I feel like all my family knew about it, even though she said they didn't. I just felt like everybody knew about it. Remember, I was named after this guy, Sandee. So my name at the time was Vincent Lopez Mapp III. And you know me as Vincent Ellis White. So, I'll get to that. And so I started getting in a lot of trouble, just not caring about grades and everything. And fortunately, I was able to get myself back on track, because even with that stuff going on, I had a really strong like foundation with my family. Like I was in church every Sunday. My whole family was heavy in our church in Southside Zion Baptist Church. I was in karate, taekwondo. I played soccer for 5 years. Like I did all kind of stuff that my family just had me engaged in. I was in the Boys and Girls Club. So as I look back, I had my mom implemented a lot of like services and resources around me that really helped me, because I could have strayed all the way left after this. And so again, back to being looking good on paper. Like I graduated high school. I get myself back on track. I go off to college, undergrad. I get out of undergrad, and before I'm getting out of undergrad, this thing is still bothering me about my dad not being my dad. And who is this guy, Chris Anderson? And so I tried to look him up, couldn't find him. I didn't have any information about him. My mom started sharing more information as I got older. I guess she felt I was more mature. And I found out that he didn't know anything about me. I thought he had like abandoned me, but she told me he didn't know anything about me, and kind of how that situation, just kind of unfolded. And so I went from having anger towards him and the dad that I knew to just wanting to find him. The other dad that I knew was still kind of messing up in life and still in and out of jail. And I had already kind of cut off communication with him, but I wanted to know about my real father. And so in the meantime, I couldn't find him still. The world's evolving. I still can't find him. I don't have any information. On paper, though, I got a degree. I'm popular. I got girlfriends. I got friends. I'm doing great. But I still got this father wound in me. And so just to advance the story, I ended up finding my dad, but not until I'm close to 30 years old. I found him at 27 years old. Found my biological father, and ended up it was a great experience finding my father. It helped like clear up a lot of things for me. as well as I also had matured a lot, since I first found the information at 16 years old. And so my faith had increased, I had matured, and I was able to just embrace it all. And once I found him, it helped me out, like with a lot of anger that I had inside of me, a lot of confusion I had inside of me. And little did I know, it also would birth like a lot of my entrepreneurial endeavors, and like this unknown passion that I had inside of me to be able to touch people like by the thousands, with like my creativity. I started, like, I had already been creative before him, obviously, like I was writing poetry and I got poetry scholarships to college, but I didn't know I could be this creative. And I started telling people my story. And next thing you know, people say you should write a book because your story sounds like a movie. Like, I really gave you the summary, but if I told you the ins and outs of what happened in that process, it's really like a movie. So much that I've had a movie script offered to me, as well as other things. And so I ended up writing a book called Finding Chris, My Father. And I think I released it in like 2012, 2013. I had never written a book, never even thought about writing a book before, but something kept tugging in my heart to just write this book, even though my goal was only to write it for therapeutic purposes and to maybe leave it as a legacy for my son, who was 2 years old at the time when I found my father. Um, but I wrote the book, and I think that just the Most High had bigger plans for it. I started seeing visions about where the book could go, and next thing you know, like all the news outlets were calling me, and everybody was crying, and everybody wanted me to come speak at their church and at their speaking engagements, and people told me you need to get an LLC because you're selling books now, and so it just turned into a much bigger thing to where the story kind of went worldwide, well, at least like to different states around the world. And so next thing you know, like I started like being able to have open discussions about fatherhood and fatherlessness. And I'm a person, as you know me, Sandy, like I will display my emotions. I communicate, and I'm big on that. And so I would openly talk about my anger that I held. I would openly talk about how Black families hide secrets. Keep secrets and hide things. I talk about all those things. These are things that really bother me for my entire upbringing. And so I didn't know that I could resonate with so many people. And so every time I would speak somewhere, the crowd would go crazy, or the students or the church members, whoever's in the audience would go crazy. They run and want to get my book, and they want to get me on the next platform. And so it just turned into like years of maneuvering like that. And next thing you know, I got approached about doing a traveling stage play. And I turned it down 3 times because I did not see the vision at the time. And so the individual that approached me, his name is Lamont Ferguson. I'm going to shout him out. He was a screenwriter, and he approached me about doing a screenplay, him and the guy Marlon Hargrove, and they were in the 757 Hampton Roads area, and I'm from Richmond, 804. And so I was going back and forth out there because I had some connections out there, being I went to undergrad out there. And finally, I was like, y'all want to do this play? Let's go ahead and do the play. Come on. And I did not know what that would become. We did auditions, and it just, we debuted it in the, I think in Portsmouth, and it was like I was just so proud, like to sit back and watch this play unfold. My biological father, he and I were very close by then. He lived in a different city, lived in Stafford in Northern Virginia, but he still came out to my play and came out to every play. The only play that was not a sellout was my first play, my debut play. After that, we took it to Richmond, and every play sold out from then on. 250 seaters, 300 seaters, 500 seaters, and so on and so on. We sold out everywhere. Henrico Theater, you name it. We went to Virginia State, and it just caught like wildfire. And it just was amazing. Books were flying off the shelves. The story was all over the place. The news was loving it, and it was authentic. It was a real story. And my dad would come to everyone, and at the end of it, I would say, "Do y'all want to meet the man we're talking about?" And they're like, "Yeah." They didn't even think he's there, and then he'd walk out on stage, and nothing but tears. Like the whole room would erupt in tears. And it just was a really amazing run. And even when like that started dying down and I wanted to move on to different things, one, I always stayed connected to fatherhood programs all the time. So I always was helping fathers, helping dads, helping them get court ready or learn about court. Because while I was going through all of that success, I was also dealing with my own just the biggest, craziest custody battle I've ever seen in life. My own custody battle. To this date, I went through a 15-year custody battle. My son's now 18, so it's over now. But I went through a 15-year custody battle, which began in 2007-ish, like midway, and continued on until this year, until 2024. So I'll stop there. It's so much I could add to it, but I just want to say I dealt with the fatherlessness. I'm sorry, I dealt with the father wound and his father issues from both sides, from being, the child growing up into the adolescence to adulthood, still dealing with in adulthood, as well as becoming the father, having to make sure I don't make those same mistakes that I saw, make sure my son doesn't have to go through what I went through, not having a father there. And I will say I did break that curse, or whatever you want to call it. Like, I did break that pattern. Yeah, I did break that pattern, because one thing I can say, and anybody that knows me that's listening or watches this later can vouch, I've been there since day one. Since he was in belly, since he was born to 18 years old. And so no gaps, no nothing. Heavy, consistent fights for him. Money spent. I got full custody of my son. And he was in middle school, and and if y'all could see my son, just raised an amazing boy. And for me to have so much trauma, and so much lack of a role model, to be able to come out and be successful as a father and raise such an amazing boy, I gotta I really it blows my mind thinking about it, and I know there got to be a higher power assisting me, as well as I shout out the people that put things in place to help me still become a great man and be around great men, such as like my mom and my aunt, that put me in the Boys and Girls Club and sports teams and things like that. So that kind of roundabout combination is what makes up Vincent Ellis White. And to the point about the name earlier, I changed my name when I was in Norfolk, right? I didn't want to get my college degree and then say Vincent Lopez Map III, because it still was bothering me that I was carrying a man's name that was not my father. And so I went and changed my middle and last name. So I changed my name to Vincent Ellis White, because Ellis was the name of my grandfather, and all the males on my mom's side, my cousins, all of them have the middle name Ellis. And the last name White was my mom's last name. At the time, my mind at the time said, I know it came from my mom, at least. So I was like, I trust that last name, if anything. And so I went and changed my name, called my mom, so I was saying, I'm changing my name. I got to have my degree to say Vincent Ellis White. And so I changed it. And I've been Vincent Ellis White since I was about 20 years, up to about maybe 20, 21 years old. And now I'm 43 years old.
Wow. Well, it's time for our first break. And that is not what Vincent's career was. That's another big topic, which leads into the segment of how he got involved with like having these difficult conversations in our area. So we will go to our first break, and thank you for joining Vincent Ellis White and me, Sandee Byrd, on Emotional Elevator tonight on Inspired Choices Network. But we're going to go to a break, and if you didn't hear that part, you're going to have to go back and listen to it, or he's going to have to sum it up, because we're also going to get into his work. That wasn't his work. That was his life and what he chose to do with his life, with the trauma he went through and the challenges he had. He wrote a book. He had a screenplay. We always learn that someone else's story is a survival kit for you. And I really believe that Vincent's story is a survival book. And I hadn't gotten it yet, but it really, now sitting there thinking about it, what he kind of went through is what my oldest son went through. So that's why I've also really enjoyed getting to know Vincent, is because whenever I recommend something to one of my kids, it's always great for me to say, I actually know his story. So it's great for you to have that. But we are going to go to our first break. And then when we do come back, we are going to talk about what did Vincent do with his diploma and his job life, and how that also entailed all of this into who Vincent Ellis White is. So we're going to go to break. Make sure to stay tuned. And like I said, if you know either one of us, come over here on Inspired Choice Network and get in that chat room, because I'd love for someone to ask a question to Vincent. But we're going to break.
Are you living a life of psychological trauma or suffering from an addiction? Are you ready to learn new techniques to elevate your emotions without sustaining or obtaining them from substances that are not good for your mind or body. Then continue to tune into Emotional Elevator with trauma, addiction, life, and spiritual coach, Sandee Byrd, where you will learn techniques to elevate your emotions that don't require a magic pill, food, or impulsive behavior. Listen to Emotional Elevator with Sandee Byrd, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific, on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is Emotional Elevator with Sandee Byrd. To participate in this program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to sandy@emotionalelevator.com. Now, back to the program.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Of course, you should have joined us in the first part. Or if you're joining us now, go back and listen to Vincent's story, how he changed his name. Like, that right there is brave in and of itself at 20-some years old to decide, you know what, I'm changing my name. To write a book about what he went through, to find out who his real father was, to have a screenplay. He's won awards. He has definitely excelled. And then to also bring a son into the situation and raise him by himself with having a custody battle with him. It made him realize that he can break a generational curse that was put on him, and he broke it. And that's a lot of what I discuss on my podcast, is a lot of these absent fathers, what that felt, how it feels. But some of these topics I can't talk about because I don't know it. I've never been through it. What I can talk about is the trauma that I suffered with my mother and what I put on my kids. But Vincent is talking about some of the trauma he went through and how he elevated himself, or what he did, telling his story, being poetic about life. Doing that and using his creativity is phenomenal. So you've got to go out. We'll end up putting, his book where you can find it, the title of it and everything, when this podcast gets put out there on all the social platforms. But at the same time, now I want to dive into, what exactly did you get your degree in? And so what exactly was your field of work? I know that changed recently, but what was your field of work when you were going through all this?
Yeah, so I'm gonna extract a key word for you. You said was. And so
Okay.
I've had several wases in regards to my career. And so I'll answer your first question. My undergrad degree was in mass communications. And so it's funny how the world has kind of come back around to where, like, now social media, and like you're building content, and like you be doing reels and you doing TikToks and all that stuff, because like that was my first love. Like, I loved everything mass comm. Back then it was music videos, because I went to school and I got to school in '98 and graduated in '02, and so it was music videos, and all the things that were just visual was the beautiful thing to me, as well as photography. And so my first love was mass comm. I had no interest in anything else but that at the time. So I got my undergrad degree in that. I get out of school for a while, and I didn't really maximize the opportunities that may have been available. Like, a lot of my friends had internships in New York, and looking back, I should have done that, but I didn't do that. And so when I got out of school, there was like one option, which was to work for a TV station. They said I was gonna make like $4 or $5 an hour, and they said I was gonna like have to be available at 3 in the morning. And it was like a really weird time, and the math wasn't mathing like they said. And I was like, hold up. I was like, so I just got out of school, and I'm about to make this little bit amount of money, and I got to be available at 3 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night or whatever the hours were. I was like, no, I'm trying to go get money. Like this what I went to school for, So I just started working in other areas. I worked every job you can imagine. I've worked every job, as well as during undergrad. I worked 2 jobs during undergrad. So super hustler, like started working at 14, never stopped. I've always had multiple jobs and multiple things going on to earn income. And so I couldn't fathom just what they were having me do. And so I didn't do it. So I started working other jobs, and then I was like, okay, I want to get some more education. So I'm like, what do I want to do? I'm not operating in my field, but maybe I can try something else. And so I go back and I get a master's, and I wanted to be, at this time, I started kind of delving into like mentoring and working with kids and things like that. And I was just like, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do and what I want to be. And I started dabbling with the idea of being a counselor, because I was like, everybody tells me all the time, they love talking to me. I can like build rapport quickly. I can break people's walls down. I've always been open to share my life experiences, and I thought I'd be perfect as a counselor. So I go get a master's in education. And so around this time, the rules and laws had changed around this time. Like at the time, before they changed, with my master's degree in education, I go do certain follow-ups in regards to residential hours and things like that, and I could go become a counselor. But those rules changed like right at the time I was getting my degree, and so I had a big problem with the fact that like I got this degree, I was following the route that they said follow, and now the rules changed or the goalposts moved on me. And so I had to basically like go through a whole nother portion of another degree, and I wasn't feeling that either, Sandy. So I was like, nah, I'm gonna just get out here and just make some things shake, pretty much. Didn't really know what I wanted to do at the time. I didn't know how divine and how purposeful my life was going to end up being. And so at some point, I'm working odd jobs. I'm working at Comcast. I'm doing sales. I'm doing everything retail, everything you can imagine. At some point, I switched over to working as a one-on-one counselor in a school, Westover Elementary in Southside Richmond. And I just did it. I did an amazing job as a one-on-one counselor. You didn't really need to have a specific background like human services or social work. And so I just did a great job. Like I was in the schools, and I could build rapport with anybody from adults to kids. And I knew that about myself. So I went in there and I killed it. Like it was easy. And it's from then on, like I started just getting jobs in that field. Like I went back and started taking the necessary classes to be able to become like a QMHP and do different things like that. But I always just did well in those jobs. The part that was the hardest for most people, which was connecting, that was the easiest part for me because of the life that I had lived. And so I used my traumas, and I used my, even my uncertainties and even my things I was currently dealing with, and just my ability to be able to connect it and relay it to others. And that worked in regards to building rapport. So I worked all types of jobs in the human service and social work field, from one-on-one counselor to group homes to intensive in-home to one of the most impactful jobs for me was when I became an actual foster care worker or / social worker in Richmond DSS, Richmond Department of Social Services. And that's when I really like saw my gift at the time. Just being able to connect with those foster kids, and basically like it would be children that, just for those who may not know, it may be children that had to be removed out of their biological homes for different things. It could be for neglect. It could be because the parents say that they can't handle the child anymore. It could be for abuse, many different reasons why. And so my department would partner with the CPS department, as well as lawyers and all different partners. And then we would partner with them and try to basically remove this kid from an unsafe environment, place him in a safe environment. Sometimes the environment may be on the other side of town. That environment may be in another state. Wherever the environment may be, we place them in a new home. And so, as you can imagine, even though it's traumatic what they may have been dealing with in the home to get removed, it's also traumatic to get placed in a stranger's home. And so we would help prepare the children to be able to kind of maneuver in this new space. I'd also have to work with the biological parents, because sometimes they might not have done something that they're going to lose the child completely. It might be something where they just need to work on something or take some classes, something like that. or they could have done something major that they are going to lose the child completely. And we're looking at adoption. There's so many elements and aspects to being that worker. I was very intrigued, even though I was also highly stressed. And I learned that stress life that social workers live, that I heard a lot of social workers talking about. Heavy caseloads, being overworked, underpaid. You doing like major things in people's lives. You're carrying these burdens of the children and the parents and the aunts and uncles and everybody who's involved with them. You're dealing with all these external partners, from therapists, psychiatrists. You having to go visit them once a month. You're dealing with angry parents, angry at you, like you did something. Like all those things you're dealing with for 50,000 a year, for 45, for 55,000 a year. It was numerous times I had to leave my office and go pick up my son at daycare at 6 o'clock because it closed at 6, bring him back downtown to Richmond and put him in a chair and have him playing and spinning the chair and give him something to occupy his time while I continue writing a 16, 20-page foster care plan, because I got to go drop it by the court that night, because we get penalized if we don't turn it in by a certain time. And so that's that foster care life. But the good thing is I was making heavy impact upon people. Like, it was so many parents that would tell me they appreciate just me for many different things. But it was times I had to share my own testimony to reel them back in. It was times I had to calm fathers down because they were just saying nobody cares about us and the system this and the system that. I'm like, listen, you don't even know who you're talking to. I know firsthand. I've probably been dealing with this longer than you have. And then like that rapport. Sometimes I call myself the unconventional social worker at the time, because I wasn't coming in on some like professional like tie all buttoned up. Like I'm loosening my tie if I even got one on. I'm like mixing my vernacular. Like I'm making sure I can be relatable, because that's how I reach people. That's how I've always reached people. Even though I can be a professional with the best of them, like that's the way I reach people. Same as being a man of faith. Like I'm not a Bible toter. I'm not a like always in your face church, this and that. What I do is I live my life. And when you say, how is he so happy? How does he have all these things happening to him? You mentioned books, plays. Somebody is going to always say to me, how do you get that? And then especially if they know my story, they assume I'm supposed to be giving off the opposite, sad and down and angry and confused, and I don't give that off. And so then that's when I got to say, well, listen, you really want to know, and then I start breaking things down. So that's kind of how I move. And you mentioned like being genuine. I'm genuine. I'm authentic. And I gotta again go back to crediting like the people that raised me. Like I can't pinpoint a time when somebody said, "Son, always be gentle and authentic." But I just know somehow, some way, they put something in me early that made me always be the way that I am now. Like this ain't nothing new here. Like I've been open and transparent. I just maybe became more articulate as I grew older, but I've always been this way because there's some type of healing that I get personally from being that way. And then in a secondary fashion, I help others get healed too. And I do know that is part of my gift, from many things, from all the countless people that got impacted by my book, to be bringing fathers and sons and daughters together, because I've done that thousands of times. I get the DMs, I get the emails and messages about that, to my play impacting people by the hundreds each time, to my play traveling, to my story traveling. I got flown to New York. Me and my father got flown to New York, and we were on ABC, which that's the largest ABC network in the United States. 26 million viewers. They ran my story every Father's Day. 26 million viewers. And so people would just call me randomly, email me, DM me, and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe your story," or "I'm going through the same thing." And so that's how I could just kind of connect to people. But when I started speaking at universities, because all the universities started calling me to speak there, but what I would do, instead of talking about finding Chris, my father, which was my story, and I was proud to share that story, I said, I want to change the game a little bit. Like if I'm talking to college students, I know that these professors are preaching to you, make sure you stay within the lane of your major and get this intern and that internship. And while that may work for some people, I want these students to know that don't work for everybody. It didn't work for me, but yeah, I was still considered successful, to the point where people kept calling me saying, "Come speak about your success." Okay, if you want to hear about my success, let me let you hear about it. Okay, I got a degree over here in this that I don't use. I got a degree over here in this that I don't use. I got certificates over here that I don't use. I worked 100 different jobs, all different types of jobs that I really, looking back, a lot of them, 80% of them, I didn't give a F about, you know what I'm saying, until I found my passion of working with people. and helping people. And then the universities, when they called me to speak about success, that was at the time because I had so much going on. I'm like, now listen, I don't have degrees ain't lined up with nothing, but yeah, I got a podcast that's we had 100,000 viewers every time. Podcast. I had books. I had plays. I was in like local movies. My story had been presented. I had a Hollywood producer present a contract to me to make it a full-fledged movie. And so it was success happening. So I want them to know success is not linear. Like success is just going to be, if it's for you, it's going to happen for you. And your path is not going to be clear cut the way some professors present it. And so I let them know, look, I got all these degrees. And at the time I started getting down on myself, looking back, like, how do I have 3 different degrees that don't match at all? And it would make somebody laugh when they hear that until I let them finish laughing. I say, but let me show you how I tie all these things together. Now I do radio. Now I do podcasts. What is that? That's mass comm, right? Okay, cool. Now I educate people. I do presentations. Is that education? Wait, I got a master's degree in education. Now I have an LLC. Now I manage my own business as an entrepreneur. Wait, I have an executive graduate certificate in business. I'm really now utilizing all my degrees without even knowing it. And so then when I finish doing that, the students is in an uproar. They're like, oh, I love this. Like it gives them hope because some of them might be dealing with what I dealt with, which is like I didn't properly like utilize the different elements that were presented to me. Being on I could have been on my school's radio station, but I didn't. I could have went to New York and interned at Court TV like one of my best friends did, but I didn't. So my path was different, but I still came out successful in my own right. And so I really like encouraging people. I really love impacting people's hearts. I have ability to do that, leveraging and utilizing my life experiences to be able to impact people. And I don't go where like I want to go where I can be the most impactful, like wherever that is. If that's in the trenches, if that's in the church, if that's on TV, on a macro level or micro level, I want to go where I can be the most impactful. So that's kind of how I move.
Wow. Wow. And there's a reason why, like, I kind of gravitated towards you because going through some of my transitions in life and going, wait a minute, at 50 some years old, I want to recreate my life. What in the world am I thinking? But that's exactly what you tell people. Like,
Yeah.
anything you went through, and what I love about you is your story and everything. You're teaching people that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay
Right.
to embrace the changes that happen within us. And that's what to me is so wonderful about you, is because you're okay with telling your story. Whereas back in our day, I'm going to lump you in there because you're not that much younger than me. Yes, you are. But back in that day, we didn't tell our stories.
Right. Right.
We did not tell. We were not vulnerable enough to tell somebody, this is what I went through. I really didn't know my father. All of this, we didn't talk about it. You just went on, got your degree, go to work what you got your degree in. No, you
Right.
got your degree in mass comm, you need to work in mass comm. Take that pay cut because it could lead to something. That's the way I was kind of raised. And you were the one that was like, no, I'm going to tell my story, wrote a book about it, got on TV. Everything you've done is because you are true to yourself. You're very passionate and you want to help people. I've never seen someone who wants to build people up so much. But now we're going to kind of get into those difficult conversations, because your difficult conversations can be difficult conversations.
Well, that's the title.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I was at only a few, and I wish I would have known. I really wish I would have known about it years ago when they started, because
Yeah.
even the few I've been at have been impactful to me on
Right.
a whole nother level.
Yeah. No, I especially when I met you and I felt like we were kind of kindred spirits. I was like, man, I wish I had met her before. I started it in 2022. Recently celebrated 2-year anniversary, and I promise you, like the ones that you have witnessed, they've all been like that, but bigger crowds, if you can imagine. And so it's a really transformational thing to witness, to be present for. And it goes back to that divine purposefulness that I think I have and calling that I have on my life. And I speak confidently because uh, my Most High wants me to be confident in my gifts, and so I'm confident in Him, and so I do speak up. I'm also rebellious, and I'm a maverick too. Everything about me is unconventional, and so that's why when I get up there and speak to students, everybody else on a panel like that spoke about the linear path. Ain't nothing about me or my life linear, so same with difficult conversations. Like, who's doing that? Like, people want to have the safe conversations. People want to safe space you to death. No, I want to have difficult conversations out in the open. I do want the space to be safe, but I want to have difficult conversations out in the open. And it may make you say, ooh, he talking about that. I can't believe he talking about that. But after you get past that initial shock, we're gonna talk about that. And so these things, just being a creative, like, these things just come to me. Like, the book came to me, like, it was my story, but the way I put the book together, I started writing my book backwards. I started my first chapter with me finding my biological dad. I came up with that. Like, I just sat at home and started writing my book. And first of all, I never wrote a book in my life. Next thing you know, the pen's flowing. Like, I said, I don't know what's happening here. And like, next thing you know, I get creative. I start writing my book backwards. Fast forward, the book's done. The book blows up, and then the plays. Then I start doing stage plays. Never did a stage play in my life. That blows up too. Boom. I used to be nervous about speaking in front of crowds. Next thing you know, everybody wants me to speak. I'm thrusting in front of crowds. I got to get it together. You know what I mean? So I go from being awkward and speaking too fast to now I'm captivating crowds. Again, these are all book, stage play, motivational speaking, things I never had a desire or interest in, nor training. And then I start doing them very well, at a high level at one point. Then I started getting paid for them. I mean, it just continued. I learned about business. I didn't want to be a businessman. I just wanted to make a lot of money. I didn't even know what I wanted to do besides working with music and videos. And next thing you know, like, I start, getting paid for speaking engagements. I start managing my own business in regards to books and stage plays. And imagine $10 a ticket, a 500-seater. We sold them out, and then I sell books at the intermission. I mean, I'm leaving every night with 10 grand in my pocket. And to be in your early 20s and getting that on the side, as well as working a full-time job, I was loving it, as well as being impactful towards others and doing what I love, sharing my story. It was a win all around for me. And so even when that slowed down, that stopped, I move on to the next thing. And it's always something impactful. It's always been that way, whether we're talking about work professionally or my community efforts. So work. Well, my jobs, my pursued degree, it was not in any of these fields. Like, I was in mass comm and education, but next thing you know, I started working in human services, social work, and I'm in that field 10 years when I turn around. And I'm like, look at this. And when I look back at it, I think it's because of what I went through. I think that even I kept trying to get away. I kept trying to go to different jobs, and next thing you know, I end up back in human services. I end up working in social work again, behavioral health again. And I'm like, Lord, why do you keep like sending me back to these jobs? And I think it's because that's where my gift is, and not so much foster care and social work. I don't think it's there. I think it's just with people and building rapport. I can build rapport with the best of them. I can break the best of them, their walls down, and we start getting to like the root of stuff. And so there's that. And so fast forward difficult conversations. I've done so many different things. I've had so many difficult conversations as a social worker anyway. I'm removing children from the home. I'm submitting paperwork to terminate parental rights. I'm looking parents in their eyes across from them at the table and say, we're going to be removing your child. You're never getting your child back. I've had conversations like that are the most difficult conversations. And continuing on to talking to my son about his mom and having to face off in front of his mom in court, and and having to meet my biological father for the first time and have that conversation and take a paternity test to confirm that he's my father. I've been having difficult conversations. So when I was approached in 2022 by a program manager at Common House, a social club here in Richmond, and she's like, what are you doing? You're here every day working on your laptop. You seem focused. What are you doing? What do you do? And I could have said anything. I promise you, this goes back to a divine calling. I could have said anything. the first thing came out of my mouth was, I was like, I do a lot. So I'll just say that I have difficult conversations all the time or quite often. And she was like, that's interesting. She's like, people are normally scared to have those. And I was like, I'm not saying I'm nobody's expert, but I'm not scared to have them because I've had so many. And she was like, what do you think about doing some? We're trying to get some programming started here. What do you think about, maybe us collaborating and creating that? I said, well, by this time, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I have been doing this stuff for a long time. I said, I can create it. If you just give me the platform, let me know like what parameters I got to operate in, I can create it. But she wanted me to be the talent. And I said, no, even though I have those conversations, I'd like to curate this thing and moderate it. And let me pick the panelists because I also have built a very strong and extensive network to where I can call upon many people from politicians to therapists to mental health workers to whomever that people I know also have difficult conversations. She's like, let's do it. And I debuted it in March 2022. We had a lunch and learn, and it was amazing. I had my lawyer who had helped me gain custody with my son, and she'll even tell you this is the most complex and difficult like case ever, ongoing case ever. And she helped me get custody of my son. So I had my lawyer on. I had the chief of staff for the Richmond Police Department, and I had the director of school counseling. So I covered school, I covered police, and I covered the legalities of like custody as well as criminology and things like that. And so we had a really deep, difficult conversation out in the open. It was rough, and I didn't know how it would go. It was my first time doing it. I just knew my notes and what I was going to flow off of in my heart. And I mean, people were crying, we were laughing. People networked at the end of it. We served food. Like it was just phenomenal. Next thing you know, I said, oh, I want to keep doing this. I did it quarterly, and I would just change up topics, or sometimes I would have no topic. I just want to talk about the importance of having difficult conversations. Because that was the title. It was very lengthy. It was the importance of having difficult conversations. And so I didn't even have a title. We just would talk. Next thing you know, people talking about losing their parents, therapy, fatherlessness. I mean, racism, like rape. I mean, like all those tough topics we talked about out in the open. But I also had, just amazing people in there. And it grew, it grew in size from 10 to 20 to sometimes I have 60, 80 people in there. Even though I like an intimate setting. So the way I do it now with lesser people, I do enjoy that the most. But I'm just saying it grew at one point, and so people started taking notice about it. And next thing you know, Common House and I just kind of saw things with different viewpoint. They still appreciated what I built there, but I wanted to take it to a different place. And I ran into the owner of the Well Collective, Ashley Williams, at a happy hour one day. And she's like, I've been seeing what you've been doing. You should bring it over to the Well Collective. And it's just, again, divine because I'm looking for a space. And we collaborate. Next thing you know, I start having it at the Well Collective. And that's where I met you. And this time what changed is that the intimacy of it changed. It turned into a more intimate setting, only 20 to maybe 30 people. Also, it would come to where I started doing subject-based and subject matter topics. And so it wasn't just how do we have difficult conversations. It was let's talk about race. Let's talk about people of color in the workplace. Let's talk about the angry Black woman stereotype. Let's get all this stuff out in the open. And so that's how I like to live. I'm like that in my relationships, platonic or romantic. I'm like that in professional settings. I'm an unconventional social worker. I'm like that, the person you see in difficult conversations with. And I don't know if you notice, I put humor in it all the time. And so that's like on purpose as well as natural. It's natural because I love to laugh. I really believe I would have been a comic in like my other life. But also it's a tactic as well because humor diffuses everything. And so if I can, and I know I have the gift to make people laugh and kind of be like this, like witty, quick witted. Like if I can put humor in a space that is tense, everybody's like, oh, how are we gonna talk about that? And next thing you know, you're laughing, and now we can talk about the angry Black woman, but you already been laughing. I already diffused a lot of it already. So now you feel safe. Now it's diffused. Now let's get to the nitty gritty. Let's talk about what we came here to talk about today. And we're gonna respect everybody's opinion, but we also gonna be vulnerable. We're gonna speak openly, and we're gonna make it happen. And so then it's still, my crowd is still going strong. My following is still going strong. But now I had this vision like a month or so ago. I want to make a documentary on difficult conversation. And somebody else might say, you can't do that. It's too much. You don't know how. But I'm not going to say that because I did a book, I did a play, and the list goes on. I've acted, You can look up my acting, series I've been in as well. Like, these are things I never was prepped for, but I did them. So you think I'm scared about a documentary? It's just a matter of logistics. And so now I'm working on getting a videographer, and we're gonna start filming some portions of difficult conversations, still keeping the authenticity of what we discuss in there, and respecting confidentiality. But I do want to get some tidbits. I want to put it together, and I want to hopefully have it finished sometime in mid 2025, or have it debut in 2026 at like the Africana Film Festival, or maybe even bigger heights like a Sundance. You interview some of the people that have been in the audience. It's trademarked. I got logos, and we moving forward because this is something that's on my heart now. If I could move around the world and just have these all across the world and make money and still impact people, like, I would be a happy guy. For real, I would. I really would be.
You have like talked through every single break. Do you realize that? And we have 3 minutes.
You got to cut me
Um,
off. You got to cut me off.
I know I do. But since we only have 3 basic minutes left, there's no time to really take a break. But through all of this, what I think inspires me the most, and that's where like my podcast name came from, is the emotional elevator, because as a woman who's gone through trauma, I get the emotions. You've seen my emotions, so
Yeah,
that's no secret.
I
You've
love it.
seen the emotions
I love it.
I put out there. But what do you do? And this has got to be in like 2.5 minutes. What do you do to elevate your emotion, to keep it elevated? Because considering difficult conversations, considering fighting for your son, considering not knowing your dad, really, all the trauma you've gone through, what do you do to elevate your emotions?
I do a lot. I do a lot of things that calm me down and soothe me. I meditate. I take walks. I listen to music. I'm heavy into music. I listen to podcasts. I used to read a lot. I don't do much of that lately, but I used to read heavy. Like, I would go sit in Barnes and Nobles 3 days a week for hours and just read. And so I love information. And I like to be around people. I like to entertain and travel. I travel a lot as well. So those things help ground me. I don't know if they elevate my emotions, but when I think about elevate my emotions, I'm thinking about not elevating in the sense of just them getting higher, but more so just helping me to be able to understand them, be able to maintain and control them, and apply them appropriately. And so these are things that I can list that I think about that help me to be able to regulate my emotions.
Because that's a big thing I like to talk about on my show, is when I have these heavy topics, like next week is imposter syndrome, because I've dealt with that myself too. But how do we elevate ourselves once we realize or recognize a trauma or a problem? And that is the one thing that I've noticed with you, when we're having those difficult conversations and it seems to veer a little bit, you still have that smile on your face, like, it's okay. We're going to veer a
It's
little
okay.
bit. It's okay.
Yeah.
We can
I'm
do
a
this.
calm. I'm a calm guy. I'm a calm guy. It don't mean I
Yes, you
can't
are.
turn up, Sandy. I can definitely turn up with the best of them. But I'm just overall a calm guy, and I don't know where that came from, but I can really manage my emotions, and that's one of my favorite things about myself, is that I watch people lose control all the time over minor and major stuff. But either way, I watch it, and I don't want to lose control, so I try to maintain. And I've been through
Well,
so much, man. There got to be a factor. I don't know how. That's gonna take a therapist, which I do have a therapist, but I just know I appreciate that I can maintain my regulate my emotions. It helps me be
and
able
that
to,
is
yeah,
wonderful. That
yeah,
is, I mean, and it's great to have someone who can be, as you are, vulnerable, and on the same time show it's okay to be vulnerable. And now you just lift yourself back up. You don't sit in it. You realize you can lift yourself back up and
yeah.
neutralize. Because that's one of the biggest things I talk about, is neutralizing. And guess
Visualize,
what?
yeah.
We have only 30 seconds left. And this
Mm,
was such a great conversation this week with Vincent Ellis White on Emotional Elevator. I might have to bring him back on, because there
let's
was
do
so
it.
much more to the story. And he is such a great person to get to know. So thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Emotional Elevator Show. Sandee returns Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Until then, start elevating your emotions and stop riding the emotional elevator that is stopping you from living the life you deserve.